Right, guys, Good Morning Britain was on this morning with guest Dominique Samuels, who actually talks a lot of sense, going against Susan Michie, and in a different clip, Dr. Shillary also gets roasted. First, though, we're going to deal with Susan Michie, the sage member and dedicated hardcore communist, having spent 40 years as a member of the UK Communist Party. She is obviously part of the group that spent the last year fucking up our lives, and it should also be noted that this commie trout is not a medical scientist or virologist. She ain't even a fucking biologist, let's be honest. As most will know, she's a behavioural psychiatrist, so knows how to control other people's behaviour, which, as you know, has been used on a massive scale against the general public. She is certainly not an authority on anything outside of that, which of course the masks involve, so maybe that explains why she's on the show, I guess. One thing you can be sure of is that she's going to be a supporter of the mass testing we're seeing, which I'm happy to report I have had no part in. As I've said in previous videos, I would rather guide my dad into my sister a million times over than take a single fucking test, let me tell you that. The fact people like her are involved solidifies my feeling on that one even more. Either way though, what I really want to talk about is Richard Madeley going on a bit of a mad one, shitting all over this commie and Dr. Shillary. First, he calls out Susan Michie for being a 40-year member of the Communist Party, which forces her to say, "You got me on here as a scientist," to avoid answering the question and admitting it to the public. Because as you know, and she likely does, he literally has her by the balls on that one, and the British public does not support communism in the slightest. Here, take a listen to it for yourself.
I'm going to ask you. You've been a member of the Communist Party for about 40 years now. You're still a member. And we know that communism is basically statist. We look at communist countries around the world and we see that they are tremendously top-down dominant and control societies that they rule over. And I just wonder, and I'm putting this question on behalf of those who wonder about your politics, if your politics actually informs your sense of control. It's not just the medical arguments, but you have a kind of a political bent to want the state to tell people what to do.
I've come on your programme as a scientist, as do all people who come onto your programme as scientists. They come on to talk about the evidence, relevant theories, how we approach our scientific disciplines, and you don't ask other scientists about politics. So I'm very happy to speak about science, which is what my job is, and to limit it to that.
Now obviously I don't need to say much about that because the lack of an answer there says more than I ever could. But I do need to say well done to Richard Madeley for actually pointing out what many people are saying outside of these media circles. The only downside to it in my mind is at the end he says she gave an okay answer when no she bloody didn't. In my mind, when she said I am a scientist, he could have said you are a psychologist, not an epidemiologist, so how can you talk about masks in relation to public health? Obviously, that would have shut her down instantly, but of course he wasn't going to do that, was he? In fact, we're lucky he pointed out the Communist Party connection to the public. Her answer don't even really matter, let's be honest. Now the general public who see that know she's a bit of a commie. It should make them less likely to actually listen to her, or indeed a lot of the other tosspots that are coming out with similar crap. Up next though we have Dr. Shillary Jones, bedwetting tosspot extraordinaire, who gave advice some would call waterboarding while he calls it being safe.
And they want the message to be out there that even on a beach, if you're looking at those pictures that we've just seen, if you're on a crowded beach, there's a risk of transmission. And in theory, if you go swimming in the sea, you should be wearing a mask.
Yep, that complete shit weasel there was back on GMB this morning, spouting his usual fear porn when Richard Madeley decided to pull him up on the numbers he was throwing out like they meant something in reality. Let's see what he actually said.
You know, Susanna, don't you, that experts are divided on this, completely divided, just as the population are. Look, in Australia, they've got a fraction of the cases that we have, and half the country's in lockdown. Here, we're thinking of abandoning all restrictions, and when we've got cases going up 74% in a week and 55% hospitalisations up in a week.
But we've got the vaccine.
Yeah, that is a difference. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do have the vaccines, but what people forget is that vaccination doesn't give you 100% protection. You know, 10% of people who have double jabs are still likely to get the virus.
Don't you think
they're
that
still
the use
vulnerable?
Of percentages, you're using percentages to make the case here, that's a bit misleading because, yes, the percentage rise in hospitalisations has gone up, I think 24%. That sounds a lot, but in real numbers, it's starting from a very low level.
Yeah, but it's
so in real numbers, it's not many.
But it's increasing.
So Dr. Shillary is firing off all these percentages, making out like they matter, but obviously using percentages for something like that often hides the fact that the numbers are very small to start with. He said 75% or some shit, but if the number starts with 1 or 2, then a 75% increase in relation to the population is less than a fart in the fucking wind. Shit, not even Diane Abbott could do the maths on that one and make this bit of fear porn work out. But once again, I do have to say, well done to Richard for actually calling out the bullshit that's going on there. It's a shame him and other journalists won't call it out as we know they could and should. But guys, as always, remember, links are down below for you to check out if you want to. I will also stick them as a pinned comment going forward because mobile viewers often say they can't see them in the description.